Okay, Gene, I've started the recording, so why don't you go ahead and introduce Mary Sue today.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the continuation of CA Workload Automation Tech Talk series. Today we are joined by Mary Sue Redd, who will present the second part of a two-part series on getting started, CA Datacom AD with CA Workload Automation CA7 R12. Part 2 will cover managing CA Datacom for use with CA7 and converting the data for use with CA7. You can get a copy of the slides for today's presentation, as well as a replay for Part 1 of this series on the CA Workload Automation user community webpage. If you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and submit it using the Q&A button on your screen, and we'll address questions at the end. Okay, Mary Sue, over to you.
Thank you, Jean. Good morning, all. Glad that you were able to meet with us this morning. Talk real quickly. We are going to be talking about the conversion of data when we're going to R12. I've got an overview of it. Then we're going to go into the processes that make up the conversion itself. It'll be a pre-conversion, conversion of the data and the import of that data. We'll have a quick talk about the Datacom AD space estimator. We're going to go into validation, and of course, we'll pick up all the questions as we finish up today. Okay, let's go into here. All right, you're familiar with pre-R12, CA7 having a set of database files, the combination of the SAS job, the SAS DS, and the IDS, the ARP, and the VERM files. That's what made up the database prior to R12 and contained all of the data needed to schedule and submit and work with your jobs. We're also going to be converting the status queues, your active, ready request, pre and post, and the prior run queue. Also, it's kind of interesting, the trailer queue. I'm sure that I see we've got some long-time users, if you will, of the product, and I am sure many of you have hit that wall where the trailer queue physically ran out of space and had to react very quickly to enlarge that trailer queue, which is a process that has to be done. It's not a simple one. But that will no longer be the case here, as we will expand files as needed through Datacom AD facilities. We'll have more about that. Then we're going to look at the conversion process, which is really a very basic. You will prepare to convert the data. You'll convert the data, you import the data, and you validate the data. Okay, nice little picture here of the pre-conversion. And you start out using 11.3 facilities. You're going to use your 11.3 database files. The first thing you're going to want to do, and the way this picture looks is that you use BK00 to make a backup and then run DBVR. Actually, DBVR runs against a live database, if you will. So you will run that database verification against your live 11.3 data. That's the first step in doing the conversion of data to make sure that it is as clean as possible. Now, DBVR does not catch every error that can be in the database, but it does go ahead and flag some of those. The rest of them may be flagged if there are other errors later in the process, and we'll see that. But basically, you're going to apply any corrections that are needed out of DBVR, make a BK00 backup, and that is what will be used when you go into the pre-conversion. He's going to use your BK00 backup, the IDCAMS backup of ARF and VERM, and a copy of your dump queue file. And we'll go more into this as we go along. But all of that feeds into the pre-conversion to give us the pre-conversion report. Now, this itself may also point out some new and different errors. And I'm using air quotes here when I say errors, because I want to say that with 11.3, CA7 could work very well with some of this data that might not have all of its pointers intact or might have pieces and parts missing of the data. But 11.3 was very forgiving of that and could go ahead and work usually just fine. There were times when we had to do cleanup because of scheduling or other errors, but for the most part, 11.3 was very forgiving. The good news and bad news, if you will, is that Datacom AD has to have the data in a certain format with all of the pieces there and existing. And when it finds that it can't find all of the pieces it needs, it will tell you about it. And we'll get into that in a moment. As it says, why didn't the issues flag or cause problems in R3? The way the database was designed, it just overlooked or didn't even use some of the data that in some instances. In other words, you could have a maintenance type job that didn't attach data set requirements. So if you had data set issues where pieces and parts weren't fully in the database, it really didn't matter because it wasn't used. Some of the problems actually could cause some unexpected behavior in 11.3. And I'm sure you guys have seen that if you've had to run DBBR with 11.3. Something I wanted to mention, too, while I'm at it, we talk about the DBBR program and how you'll want to run that program. The 11.3 DBBR looked at certain things. It didn't check everything in the database, but it did look for certain things and report on those errors that it found. There is a new Cal 2 DBBR that comes with R12 once you have converted your data that not only can report on errors, but can also fix them. So that's the good thing about the DBBR program for R12 is it has been enhanced to not only find errors, but to fix them. Some of the common pre-conversion issues that we've seen are invalid dates and times, pieces of data missing, that one half of a relationship missing, job requirements are DD referencing an undefined DSNBR, and the IDS out of sync, meaning that there's numerous things that we've found in that area, but where we might have two different data set entries pointing to the same IDS entry. Some very strange things that I've seen since I've been going through this. I didn't realize how many problems we had in our database that were masked by 11.3. These issues can usually be fixed by using CA7 commands, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Big one here, though, is that level 1, excuse me, can assist you cleaning up the 11.3 data. And just quickly on that, I wanted to mention that I ask you guys as clients, usually I try to send out an email, and ask you guys to send me copies of your 4 files, your BK00 backup, your ARF backup, your VERM backup, and a copy of your dump queue data set. Now, there are times when you can't get that dump queue data set to me. I've had clients that couldn't shut 7 down, and it was a disk of old in 7's proc, so you couldn't copy it while 7 was up. If you can get a dump queue data set, it's very important to have, and I'll kind of explain that to you. When I have worked through a lot of these issues, what I do when I get your data, get those 4 files in, I run them through these same processes we're going to talk about here. I lay them down, I point a 7 at it, that's a non-job submitting. Of course, I don't have your JCL, I don't have anything but your data. And I can then run the cleanup commands through to make sure that I have everything cleaned up that's needed. So it's very important to me that you open an issue when you're getting ready to do the conversion, that you provide as many of those 4 files to me that you can, and that you allow me to run it through the process here and give you a BTI deck with the commands needed to do the cleanup if there are any needed. I have done this so far with about 200 different databases, and I found maybe a tenth of them didn't need any commands at all. It was really clean. Don't know how that happened, because that seems to be the anomaly here. Usually there's some cleanup that needs to occur, and if we can do it this way, it is less invasive for you guys, and it's like I know you've got other jobs to do besides just working with 7, where I can kind of take that off of you, give you those commands, and let you go from there. We're going to talk about the conversion now and importing that data. Once we have got the pre-conversion through, we have cleaned up any errors out of DBBR or the pre-conversion report that we found, then we're going to ask you to make a new BK00 backup that's clean now because you've run the commands through. ARF and VERM, you may need to make new copies of those if we've had to work with the ARF and the VERM entities within the database. We run that through the, let's see, the ARF, VERM, dump queue. All of that is run through the conversion program, Cal2 DCV1, that creates an export file. That export file is what will be imported into the Datacom database, the DVD ID of 770. That's done through the Cal2 DBEI program. During conversion and the import, you usually don't see as many problems at this point. Many times there's no more problems after we get through pre-conversion. But there are some that can be reported at that time, and if they are reported, don't ignore them. I don't. And in the import is where you're going to specify your logical database name. Now that becomes important because when we go to verify, we've got to make sure we use that same logical database name as well as the same files we've used to create the export file. There's also a program that's called the Database Space Estimator Utility. That export file can be input to that. The Datacom AD Space Estimator Utility will use your export file, look at all the data, estimate the amount of space. There's also a way to tell him prepare for X percentage of growth so that he gives you some room to grow in that database. You will execute that between your conversion and your import after you've got your export file. You don't have to have the MUF set up and ready before you run the conversion or the space estimator step. Create the export file or run it through the space estimator. And if you're going to put multiple instances of CA7 within a shared MUF, then all of the files, the export files that you will be putting in there can be concatenated as input to the space estimator. The output is DD cards for those data areas that you will use when you execute the job that allocates the data areas. Now, one quick note here, and I will expand on this a little bit at the end. There is a brand new APAR that came out because we found that there was a problem with the database space estimator. The APAR RO92024. You don't have to remember that because at the end I'm going to tell you to get everything, but it is RO92024, so that tells me it's brand new. There was a problem with the space estimator that was not making the trailer queue as large as it was needed. The only problem that caused was the trailer queue area of AWL in the Datacom AD database would go into extents or be made larger very quickly after you converted, even if you had used a good percentage for growth to make it larger. There was just a problem in that utility, and that has been fixed. And before I go on, I'm going to tell you towards the end, I'm going to ask you to get all the fixes up to the point where you're starting your conversion when you're ready to do the conversion. But we'll move on here. We're going to the validation. Now, once you have done your creation of the export file, done your space estimator, and got your database spaced and up and running and ready, then run the import of your export file into the new Datacom DVD ID 770, you will need to run the validation program. Validation is going to, again, take in the same files you used to create the export file, your VK00, your ARF, your VERM, and your dump queue. Those are going to be the same ones, once again, that you used to create the export file. That will go into the program. They'll be formatted, sorted out, and make a compare file. It will then run the R12 version of reversion, and we'll talk about reversion a little bit here in a bit, which is going to take what is in the Datacom database that you imported in, spread it back out into a representation of the SAS VK00 R firm and dump queue files, put that through a sort, and have the reverted compare file. Then those two files, the original compare file, the reverted compare file, are compared. If they do not match, you will get a non-zero return code and messages telling you what does not match. If they do match, you get a return code 0. Now, once you've gotten that return code 0 out of validation, you are safe to start R12 of CA7. If there are any errors pointed out at the time that you run the validation, we ask that you call in, open a Sev1 with us so that we can look at this data and tell you whether or not this is something that we need to fix before you carry on. And by that I mean, I've had one case where a network, an old network, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the networks in CA7, setting them up, but it didn't get into the new R12 database. It was in the 11.3. It wasn't caught by any of the other processes before, but once we looked at that message and saw what it was, consulted with the client, letting them know what was not in R12 that was in 11.3, they were fine. They didn't even know that was out there. They didn't need it. They didn't use it. So we were able to tell them that when you bring up R12, you're going to have to reply to a WTOR, and we'll see that here in a bit. The validation status here, once again, it sets a bit in the database, and that bit is checked when you start up R12 for the first time. If the database was not successfully validated, here's the WTOR that comes out. Tells you use of the data may have unpredictable results. I mean, it looks really scary. Reply cancel to end. Now, if you reply cancel, that's it. You're not going to start up R12, and it may be that you want to do some fixing of the errors that were found. What has to be done from there, we in support can help you determine. If we in support, and you, along with the client, has decided that it's okay that this data is not in R12, then we're going to ask you to reply accept. Now, the interesting thing about that is we don't even document the fact that accept is a reply that you can do. It's because we don't want you accepting bad data or data that is not the same, if you will, until we've all had a chance to look at it, talk it over, and decide for sure what you need to do. What could cause validation to fail? If you had some issues earlier in the conversion process that was not addressed, it's definitely going to fail. If there's, once again, if there thinks there's a relevant difference, if he thinks that it might be a functional difference, and that's where we're going to have to look at the messages that come out and make a determination as to whether or not it is a functional difference. And then there was the mishandling of data by conversion or reversion, and I believe, I want to hope, cross my fingers here, that we have been through so many different types of errors that we have put out fixes for that were not really errors. I'll give you one example. Early on, when I was first working with the conversion reversion process, we had a case where a date field in like a job record, a packed date field in coding has a sign on it, if you will. An F, as in Fox, or a C as in Charlie, denotes it's a packed field. And we were not making, we were making it different if it was an F or a C, but programmatically, those two things don't matter. So we were able to go in and make a change saying, okay, if that's the only difference in the date fields is that sign, then don't even flag it, just put it into the Datacom database with the same sign that we're used to, and everything goes along as fine. The going to this, the biggest thought for me on the conversion process is please get the data to me. Open a case, I will pick it up. We do have some others that are helping me with this so that we get all the data in a timely manner back to you. Usually from the time I get the data until I can get the commands to you to fix it, could be a matter of a day or maybe 2 days. It shouldn't take that long. I've even, there've been, I guess the largest one I did had 26,000 commands that needed to be entered to clean it up. Usually it's between 15 and 100 commands that will clean up your data for normal. But we can get it done and get it back to you. You'll want to execute that entire process, which is what I do, against a test copy of your production data. Address those issues the first time they're reported out of pre-conversion, out of DBDR, wherever. You don't move forward unless you get it fixed. Once again, level 1 can assist. Not only can assist, I think we should assist in resolving these issues. Include a dump queue file in your test conversion, even if it's not completely current. Now, what we mean by that is once you're ready to do your real conversion, you're going to, of course, shut down 7.11.3 with the dump queue option, then run all the data through and do your full conversion validation. The dump queue file that you provide to me or that you run through your test conversion may not be the same and probably won't be the same dump queue file that you get once you shut down 11.3 because those things are constantly changing. But what I have found when I run the data through is usually it's very old prior run queue type records that are having an issue. There have been times, and I don't know how it happened, couldn't tell you, but there have been duplicate prior run queue data that we've had to delete, and only one of them came out, so the other one was fine. But there are various ways that we can clean this up, but we do need to have a dump queue to test. While you're running through this, you'll want to retain all of the output from all of your activities, because if you get down to validation and you've got a lot of errors, whomever is taking the SEV1 call, and usually I get called on these, will need to know the inputted files and do they all match along the way. There's some things that we'll want to see out of all of the conversion activities you've run to a certain point. And definitely when you get ready to do the real conversion, you're going to want to run through the entire process again. The reason I say that, even if you've given me the files, I've given you commands to do the cleanup. Other things are going on in 7 while you're doing this. So when you really shut it down, you're going to have new data. You're going to want to make sure that you include all of your data at that time through pre-conversion and validation. Reversion. Let's talk about that for a moment. Don't have it up here, but we're going to give it a quick go. There is a program to do reversion from R12 back to 11.3. I'll start this off by saying early in our process of going R12, we had one client that did the reversion, and they were very successful. There were no problems. They hadn't added any new data, and by that I mean with R12, you've got the capability of using up to 999 JCL IDs, those have been expanded, and 999 SCED IDs, those were expanded. They didn't use anything above the 255 or 253, whatever was their site was using. So when they reverted, they didn't have an issue with trying to give the new JCL IDs or SCED IDs below the 255. So if you're testing, if you're running with it, if you've given it to your clients to use, make sure it all works as it should. You might tell them, until we're sure we're staying right here, don't add any SCED IDs above 255. Don't add any JCL IDs above 255. That would just make it easier if you did do reversion. But I'm also going to back up and say, please don't revert without getting us, meaning support, involved. What will happen is if I'm not on call, whomever is on call will get in touch with me. We'll look at what's going on at your place. Like I said, the one reversion that I was involved with, they were having performance issues, and we found out later there was a fix needed. That fix was given out. This has been a couple of years ago. So I don't think you'll need to, but if you do, get us, as in support, involved. If I can't validate, fix your problem, we have an excellent level 2 in development staff, and I can call them any time of the day or night, and they're just right on it. So that's something I really wanted to mention. Plus, big font here, I should have put it in the thing as its own slide, put on all R12 maintenance. Even, I do know we have a lot of clients that once they hit a certain point in their software, that's where they stop. They do their testing with it. They will not put on any more fixes until they're whatever. If you can, get a special bypass in those rules for your site, because when we find that there is a problem with R12 conversion, we put out a fix. Go out and look for any fixes with R12 on our support online. Make sure that you get those in your load line. Get them put on. That went pretty quick, huh? Okay, it looks like we do have one question from Penny. Hi, Penny. If we send files to support in pre-conversion and they run cleanup commands, they don't send back the cleanup files, correct? And you are correct. All I do is give you the commands to clean your data. I do not give you a clean BK00 because you've already made changes to the database. Even if you didn't do anything, jobs running make changes to the database. So I do not want to send you a back-level database, but I will send you the commands to do the cleaning. And for which files, that's BK00 backup file, ARV, VERM, and a dump cube file. If you can't provide all of those for whatever reason, send me what you can, but I must have the BK00 file. Do we have any other questions?
I don't see any, Mary Sue. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box in the WebEx. If you don't see that box in the lower right of your screen, just click the question mark icon in the upper right of your screen and it'll open up for you. Jean, in the meantime, why don't you go ahead and talk about CA World for us?
Just a quick little reminder about CA World in mid-November. There are several CA 7 sessions that we're giving. If you notice, I put the program guide URL up there. You can download that and look for those CA 7 sessions. I think there's half a dozen or more. But we are running a tech conference at CA World this year. So go on out there and have a look at the different sessions. I think there are upwards of 56 sessions that are specific to CA Workload Automation. And we are in the Mainframe and Workload Automation Content Center, and looking forward to bringing you quite a good tech conference at CA World. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, then I think that concludes today's webcast.
I think you're right, Jean. Thank you very much, Mary Sue. Thank you very much, Jean. And, of course, thank you to all of our attendees. Just a reminder, I will get this replay out in the community either this afternoon or first thing tomorrow, and we'll also share the presentation out there as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will be terminated in 5 minutes.